All right, good evening. My name is Craig Damon. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Compliance and Eligibility for the Florida High School Athletic Association. I'd like to take a moment to welcome each of you to tonight's webinar. I'd also like to begin by thanking you for joining this webinar today and being part of this presentation, and let you know that we welcome feedback from you guys. So please contact me through email, which we will post at the end of tonight's webinar, to provide feedback so that we can get better at doing things like this in the future. Tonight I'm joined by a couple staff members, Mr. Scott Jameson, who will monitor any questions that may come in and relay those with me, as well as Mr. Jeremy Hernandez. I also like to thank some special folks that helped put this together today. Mr. Sheldon Cruz, Executive Director of the FHSAA, all the county ADs and across the state who helped disseminate this information out to their respective schools, and Dr. Barbara Hodges from the Florida Council of Independent Schools, who shared that with the independent schools, and also Mr. Mike Juhas from the Catholic Diocese that helped get this information out to our member schools. The goal of the webinar today is to provide pertinent information that will benefit you as a FHSAA coach. Please understand that the information covered tonight is not all inclusive, but it's vital to you as a coach being in compliance with FHSAA regulations. A few housekeeping items before we begin. The Q&A feature is available to each of you, and as I stated earlier, Mr. Jameson will monitor it, and so please feel free to use it as you see necessary. Questions pertaining to information that we're talking about at that point in time. Once there's a pause, Mr. Jameson will get my attention and we will try to address those questions at that point in time. All other questions will be answered at the end. So if there's a question that you have may come up later on, there will be some time at the end to address those questions. Just to put out a disclaimer early, hypothetical questions are just what they are, hypothetical, where it makes it difficult for us as staff to address hypothetical questions, because without having all the facts, it's hard to give a ruling or tell you specific information, because the question may be addressed and there's several things that play a key role in how the interpretation or the ruling is made. So if possible, please stay away from hypothetical questions, or if you want to email me something specific, I can give you a better answer. But with a hypothetical question, you're probably going to get a hypothetical answer, because there's just too many unknown variables to provide an answer that may have any substance to it. So at this time, as the screen here shows you, this presentation is made up from member school coaches. I did get a few phone calls earlier. I think some of our athletic directors got this presentation tonight confused with the compliance seminar requirement that's going to take place later on in July. So if you are an athletic director that joined this webinar tonight, assuming that this is going to be for your compliance credit, I apologize to you. This is strictly for coaches. You're more than welcome to stay on here and hear this, but the information that's being presented today is from a coaching standpoint, just trying to ensure that our coaches have the information that will help make them successful throughout the year. The agenda for today, I'm going to talk about the various seasons that we have with the Florida High School Athletic Association, talk a little bit about camps, recruiting, which is the big word that we have here in the state of Florida, and then we'll address some questions at the end. For the Florida High School Athletic Association, we have various times of the year that we have specific definitions for. When you think about the school year, two of those definitions deal with the actual school year. One of those is in season. That's basically from the first day of allowable practice until your elimination from the state series or the championship events that take place. Off season, again, is during the school year from the first day of school or first day of fall practice until the last day of school. And that's the time that's outside of your sports season that takes place during the school year. And then we have the season that we call the summer. And the summer is basically the day following the last day of classes for the spring semester, or the day following the last day of spring activities, which comes first either or June 1st if classes end after May 31st. A lot of I did not realize that the 3 different seasons until I joined the association, probably been with the association a couple of years before I realized that, there was a difference between off season and summer. So some of our policies that are in our handbook deal with what you can or can't do during the off season. And as we'll talk about later on when we get to the summer part, summer is treated a little bit different than the off season. Again, for us, all season conditioning falls under policy 21. It falls underneath that off season category. So when we think about all season conditioning, we're thinking about outside of our sports season, but it's during the school year and what we can or can't do with our student athletes. The key things to remember about the all season conditioning in policy 21 is that whatever we do, whatever, it cannot be required or mandatory. It must be on a voluntary basis. And if there are drills, activities that are being done, there's not to be any sports specific drills. And again, at this point in time, we're working on increasing strength, increasing conditioning, maybe having discussions about, how to eat healthy and take care of your body and take care of yourself, possibly talking about academics and improving the academics, maybe working on college plans and college prep type material. So that's what the off-season conditioning, which is dealt with in policy 21, deals with. Policy 22 deals with our non-school teams. And we said non-school team, it's a third-party team, whether it's AAU or USSSA or some other third-party organization where you as a coach is having kids participate on this team. And the thing that we must remember there is that, again, it must be voluntarily, can't be anything that's mandated as a prerequisite for making a future team. And there needs to be clear separation from the school. There's some other things that are listed in policy 22, but the 2 main things to remember when you're dealing with policy 22 and a non-school team is that it can't be mandatory. And there must be clear separation from your school team in comparison with your non-school team, which meaning, funds that come in, they're completely separate from your school team. The uniform is different. Those type things must be in place. And if you're using school facilities, you must have a rental agreement in place before you may proceed with a non-school team. Open facilities, which is policy 23, that's another area where schools tend to, or coaches tend to have violations because they cross the line over. It must be voluntary. And I can promise you, if you make it mandatory, parents are going to contact the office. And if you put it in writing, they're going to send us that documentation where you have indicated that it's something that's mandatory and it cannot be mandatory. During this time as a coach, you're to serve in a supervisory capacity only, not providing instructions. We've had some parents turn in the actual assignment from a coach that the coach typed up on a sheet of paper and gave to a student and said, okay, we need to do these drills. We need to, for 15 minutes, we need to do this for 20 minutes and 30 minutes. You can't provide, arranged drills or any type of a practice plan for students to do. It's basically rolling the balls out and let the kids participate. And basically you're there in a supervisory capacity only. So please, again, these are 3 policies that deal with the off season. Summer, which we're in summer right now, and summer is found in policy 20. The Florida High School Athletic Association does not regulate what you do with your students. And I want to emphasize your students. That doesn't mean that kids that are transferring over that have not been registered in your school, those are students that are your students. Just the past 2 weeks, I think I probably dealt with 10 schools who have the register has been out of the office, or the county or the district has not allowed registration and won't allow registration until August. But student athletes have been participating with the school they plan to attend in the fall and have not registered or been enrolled in that school. And per our bylaws and policies, that's considered an impermissible benefit because you're only to have, we don't regulate what you do with your own students. But since those students that have not enrolled in your school are not your students, yes, we do regulate that part. And you could find yourself as a coach receiving sanctions, but more importantly, as a student that receives an impermissible benefit, they could lose a year of eligibility to participate at any school, any of the FHSAA member schools, for a year or longer for receipt of an impermissible benefit. And again, please get with your school districts because it varies from district to district, or if you're at a private school, independent school, your governing body to see what mandates or what regulations that are in place for summer. I know right now we're all sort of following the COVID-19 restrictions, so please have contact with folks that have authority over you during the summer to make sure you're not doing anything to put those kids in jeopardy, or yourself too as a coach. And again, the exceptions of policy 20, the things that we do and will regulate are recruiting, and policy 21.2 addresses football specifically, which with the use of helmets or equipment or when engaging in contact, which I know there's more than just football coaches on here. So I just made reference to where, as a football coach, you can look to see what you can and can't do during the summer, as opposed to taking time to illustrate that on our slide. Policy 24 deals with camps, and it's from the aspect of a coach, whether you're a paid coach, volunteer coach, or school official. Those are to be conducted during the summer, but you may conduct the camp during the school year if it's a fundraiser for your school or your sport program. What I mean by if it's a fundraiser, most districts or schools have a fundraiser policy in place, and as long as you go through all the procedures like any other club or any other organization that would conduct a fundraiser, then you may conduct a camp during the school year as long as it's a fundraiser. There are some exceptions to this policy, and they're pretty long, instead of drawing them all out, referencing policy 24.1.1 and policy 24.1.2 to see those exceptions. But again, just because you're allowed to have a camp, please remember that policy 36 and 37, which deal with recruiting, do apply during this time.
Craig, I have a quick question that came in regarding the last slide talking about homeschool students. The question was asked, what about a homeschool student who's going to play on a golf team? How does registering with the school determine when he or she may practice in the summer? And that's a good question. Basically, they would become, quote unquote, your student to participate once they've turned in the paperwork, the EL2, EL3, EL7, and all that kind of stuff. At that point, now those students, assuming that they meet all the criteria that's listed in state law and FHSAA bylaw, at that point, those students would then, again, quote unquote, be your student and would be able to start participating in summer workouts at that point. So obviously we know they're not officially registering as a student at your school because they're homeschooled, but once they've gone through the process that's listed in FHSAA bylaw 9 that covers the eligibility, that's when they would be considered your student. Then we had another question real quick that came in. Do you have to have a new EL7 every year like the 2 and 3? You do have to have the EL7V. That is the verification form from the county that tells the school that they're going to be participating for that the student is still an actively registered home education student in the county that they reside. So you do have to have an EL7V, that portion of the form each year.
Any else, Scott?
That's the two that we had right there. Back to you, Greg.
Okay. And policy 25 deals with camps and student participation. As an individual, things to remember: if one of your student athletes is going to participate in a camp, that they must be completely separate from the school. We do allow you as a coach to provide transportation for your own students. But when you start transporting students that do not belong to your school, then that's when there's a potential for a violation. For teams, those camps are only, as far as a school having their team attend the camp, those are only permitted during the summer. And again, it must be on a volunteer basis. It must not be a prerequisite for making a future team. Athletic recruiting, and this is our definition: is any effort by a school employee, athletic department staff member, representative of a school's athletic interests to pressure, urge, or entice a student to attend that school for the purpose of participating in interscholastic athletics. And again, we could probably spend days and hours talking about various forms of recruiting, what could or may not be recruiting, what's the difference between promoting your program and recruiting. So we'll spend as much time as you guys need on this area today, because this is where we tend to have most of our violations, or at least there's allegations of violations. So to keep you from putting yourself in a situation where now you have to defend your actions, we can spend as much time as you guys need to on athletic recruiting. And again, one of the key things that I keep hearing all the time and that I want to stress with coaches is perception is reality. It's not about your intentions. I hear all the time, well, that's not what I was intending. I was not intending to pressure, urge, or entice a kid, but instead it's how your actions are perceived. Scott may have, as a student athlete, may post something on social media, and I go and comment on Scott's post, and I may think I'm just patting Scott on the back, and Scott thinks, oh my gosh, here's Craig Damon at such XYZ school. Craig Damon wants me to come play for his school. And all of a sudden Scott takes that and, looks at that as a form of recruiting. I know that's very minor, but those are the type of things that tend to get coaches in trouble, because it doesn't typically stop at one like or a retweet. It ends up being a text message communicating back and forth, and I like what you play and this and that. Next thing you know, I'm talking about what positions that I have available. How can I get your parents here to our school? Do you need transportation? And now you're putting yourself in a position where you could be subject to which policy 36, one of the new sanctions that came into place, is that coaches can serve a minimum of 6-week suspension or 6 contest suspension, and you can lose $5,000 of your salary, which is state statute. So just trying to help as many coaches as I can, so you're not put in that situation where you've got to try to defend something that you didn't even think had the intentions of being a recruiting act that was perceived by somebody else as being an act of recruiting them. And another issue or another question that a lot of folks have is, who's the representative of the school's athletic interests? And with that, your student athletes or other student participants are considered part of the school's athletic interests. Parents, guardians, or other family members of those student athletes, any immediate relative of a coach or athletic staff, volunteers with your athletic program. So think about your booster clubs. They may not donate money, but your parents that sign up as volunteers that either work in a concession stand or do various things for you, they're volunteer of your athletic program. So they can't go out and try to recruit kids or urge, entice, or pressure kids to come to your school. Person or business or organizations that contribute either on a financial basis or provide in-kind goods, they are considered a patron of your program. So please have conversations with them about, what they say out in the community that may be perceived as enticing or trying to attract kids to your program, when your program success and what you do will attract yourself. It will advertise itself to folks with school choice and other options that are available without you having to say a word or anybody have to say a word to anyone. Improper contact, and this is typically where we have most of our violations with recruiting is the improper contact. The thing about that is it can be direct or indirect. It can be in person or through written or electronic communication. I'll probably say the most of our violations have come from folks that have either put something through electronic communication, because word of mouth is hard to prove word of mouth, but when you put in electronic communication, it's there for people to see. And, it can be done by any school employee, athletic department staff member, or again, back to the list we had before, a representative of the school's athletic interests, or a third party, which fell in, those folks that support your program, either financially or through some form of in-kind goods or whatever. And again, it's with the student who does not attend your school. That's where, please, if the kid don't attend your school, stay away from them. Don't have conversations with those students or their family. I understand sometimes you have folks that live in your community or live by you and you've known them forever. We're not saying that you can't have casual conversations with those folks that you meet up in the community, but when it turns towards sports specific or asking about positions at your school, please cut the conversation off and refer them to the appropriate staff members on your campus. And again, here's an example of someone, this is probably from about 3 or 4 years ago, but this is an example of a coach that was having text messages back and forth with the kid. And again, not saying all kids are bad, but please take the approach that, hey, you don't know who's trying to set you up. Kid may be sending you a text message trying to get you to say something, only to take screenshots of it and send it to our office. And now your number is plastic all over this text message. And now you're in a situation trying to defend what you sort of got led into. But again, it was your actions that created the violation. You have a question, Scott, that popped up? I thought I saw a question pop up.
Yeah, it's a question dealing with public and private leagues and recruiting. Recruiting is across the board. Recruiting is the rules that are in policy 36 cover public and private schools. So there's no one that is exempt. We have recruiting violations that come in all the time that are enforced, and they are enforced on public schools, and they're also enforced on private schools. So there is no difference in the way that those schools are approached. And again, if you're new, if you just came in, we do have the Q&A button down at the bottom. If you would like to ask a question, we're not going to have any live questions in terms of anybody speaking, but if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free and we'll try to get to it. I'll either type in an answer, I'll answer it here, or if it's something that we may have to take later via an email or something, but we will get it answered.
And again, visiting or entertaining a student or any member of his family. And folks, sometimes we laugh about some of these things like, okay, who's visiting, entertaining kids? I've gotten screenshots from various parts of the state where 2 assistant coaches went and made a house visit like they were college coaches to a student that did not belong to their school over the summer, trying to convince the mom and dad. And it's funny, the kids and the parents to set up a camera somewhere that might have been on the computer that was just taking pictures from various angles, showing the coach in the school staff shirt, polo with the school's emblem and everything on it. And then we've even had some schools that have kids were invited to their campus and basically took it on like a tour of the athletic facility. So please stay away from visiting or entertaining students or any of their family members because that is considered improper contact and would subject you to possible sanctions. Another area that coaches get in trouble with is, making comparisons. And I always hear I'm just stating the facts. Well, you don't have to state the facts. Your facts can be posted on your website, or people can go and with Google search now, you can go and search and find anything about anybody on the internet. So folks can learn about your program. So please stay away from making comparisons or, implying that a kid that played for your school will have a better chance of getting an athletic scholarship, or liking and retweeting things because once you like or retweet it, that's like you put your name stamp on it. You stamp that your approval or that you agree with whatever has been said, and it puts you in a position where you have to try to defend yourself. And I can't say it enough, your program will speak for itself. You don't have to say a word about it. I used to, as a former coach, I used to tell my kids we don't have to showboat when we score a touchdown or act like we never done it before, because we have done it before. So please act like you've done it before. People will know how good you are. You don't have to talk about it. And your actions, again, speak very well for you. So you don't have to promote your program. Your program will promote itself. And again, looking at the example there, basically just stating that by attending such and such school in this county, you got a better chance of getting college offers by playing at such and such school. So again, this was probably 4 years ago that the coach of the actual football program retweeted that tweet.
Craig, we did have a question come in and I answered it I answered it typing it in, but it was about the policy 36 exam that is on NFHS Learn. And that is something that is required of all coaches, principal, athletic director, and that's whether the coach is a volunteer or a paid coach. That is something that is required of every coach. The only time they would have to take it again is if something does change, or if we change the format or add some stuff to it, that would be required of every coach again. But if you have any new coaches, even if they've taken it before at their old school, they would have to take it at your new school. And any other new coaches that you get are required each year to take that policy 36 exam on NFHS Learn. And if anybody has any questions about that, as a coach, you obviously speak to your athletic director first. And then they can come to us at that point if there's any other questions about that.
And again, remember, if you didn't take the course last year, the National Federation Policy 36 course last year, it did change last year. So if you took it last year, you're good. If you didn't take it last year, then you need to take it as soon as this year or before we get in the fall season. And we sort of hit on this a little while ago. If someone comes up to you and asks you a question about, you see them out casually and to start talking to you about your program and how they can be a part of your program, refer them to the person responsible for registration or admission. Again, I'm assuming most of us are not, we're coaches, we're not admissions directors or registrars at our schools. So unless that is your responsibility, please refer that to those folks that are experts in those areas so that it keeps the heat off of you, keeps the pressure off you as a coach, where you can coach, let them do their part. And then once the student is enrolled in your school, now you can, talk to them about the various things that your athletic program has to offer and so forth. But until that student has enrolled in your school, went through the register or went through the admissions process, please refer them to those folks and let them do what they do best.
Greg, one question for you here. If you can address this one, it has to do possibly with improper contact. Is going to see a student athlete play if no contact is made with the athlete or family considered inappropriate? Does it matter if the student is in ninth grade already, or if they are in middle school? You want to address that one, Craig, about going to see an athlete?
This right here on my screen, my next screen, attending a non-school athletic contest or event to identify prospective student athletes. So if you're going to watch a game, you go watch a game, but if you're going to identify student athletes, then yes, that can be considered a violation. I think the hard part would be trying to prove that you were there to identify a student athlete. But again, yes, that is considered improper contact. If you specifically go to a non-school athletic contest or event other than your school's event that you're participating in to try to identify prospective athletes. And this goes from, doesn't matter what grade or age the kids are in, that still could be considered a violation. Just like, again, as a former coach, 7 years removed, I remember the days that we would visit our middle schools and our elementary schools and have sign-ups and as a coach talk about all the good things that I thought my program offered, made comparisons and everything else. So I'm not speaking being a hypocrite, because a lot of these things now that I'm here and learn and know better, I've done before. And I openly say that, yes, I probably violated improper contact several times now that I know. So this is part of my motivation as a former coach to share information that I know now because it wasn't shared put in that manner back then to me. So it's an opportunity for me to share the information now just to help folks their name not come across my desk where I'm having to investigate or look into something and possibly send a letter with your name on it where sanctions have been placed on you, where I'm taking you away from doing what you do best, which is being around student athletes and trying to create a positive environment for those student athletes. And the last thing on there is something also to be aware of. If you know one of your coaches or one of your assistants or somebody else in your program is recruiting a kid and you go along with it without trying to stop it, please understand that there is a policy that says suggesting or going along with any effort by any person to pressure, urge, or entice a student is considered a violation. So like the little saying, say if you know something, do something about it, stop it, bring it to the attention of your principal, your athletic director, but please help yourself by taking the necessary steps to try to put an end to it. Impermissible benefit. Impermissible benefit is also another form of recruiting. And, most people think about impermissible benefits. You think about somebody giving, the old college days when the folks were giving thousands of dollars and buying cars and those type things for athletes. In simplest terms, it's any arrangement, assistance, or benefit not offered or generally made available to all students and their families. So when you think about that, if it's something you do for everybody all the time, then it's not it could, and you can show proof of that, then it could be considered not an impermissible benefit, could be considered within the rules. But if it's something you're doing specifically for a particular athlete that you don't normally do for everybody else in general, then you're skirting on the lines of getting a sanction for providing the impermissible benefit. But also, as I stated earlier, the student that receives that impermissible benefit, you're flirting with that student losing a year of eligibility. And there's been some talk amongst folks that, especially at my section appeals, when we have section appeals where a kid gets a year suspension and for the impermissible benefit, and the coach get a $2,500 fine or a $5,000 reduction of their salary, or maybe a 6-week suspension. There's some folks that are on committees that think that that is definitely not equal or not fair when the adults should know better. So it wouldn't surprise me at some point in time that for an impermissible benefit to see someone make a motion to, or an amendment to make them equal. If a kid got to sit out for a year, a coach may need to sit out for a year because it's just equal to what a student is doing. Those students can't go back and reclaim that year of that missed opportunity, where some of us as coaches may coach for 30 years or so.
Craig, we have a couple questions here if you'd like to address those now. One of them deals with a question about, is it okay for athletes at a high school to go to a middle school or an elementary school to speak to the kids?
We have not taken issue with that, because most of the time those kids are going over there in a mentor capacity, because they are looked up to as role models in their communities and are doing the right things. If they are selected to go over there, those are probably your model students. So we have not, we've sort of approved that, not necessarily approved that, we've not taken action against schools for allowing those type of actions, because again, it's the intent. Now, if you're sending kids over to identify kids at the middle school, elementary school, the best athletes, and to do those things to recruit for you, then yes, we have an issue with that. But if it's basically to provide mentorship, to be there as role models, for community service and other things to help better possibly troubled kids at those various schools, whether it's elementary, middle school, no, we do not have an issue with that.
Yeah, I would just to add on to that, I would say if you're sending over your star players in their jerseys and they're going over there to talk about the sports, that could be an issue. But again, the mentorship thing, we wouldn't want to take something like that away. We know how important that can be, especially when they see, the older kids and how successful they are, and they talk about school and those kinds of things. Craig, one more quick question here. Says, in a rural community with only one middle school that feeds the only high school, why can we not involve our 8th graders in high school sports? The mixed junior, senior high schools have a major advantage getting to work with their kids extra years that the rest of us are not afforded. And I would say Craig, if you want to take that one, but I think the quick answer would be because they're not students at that school, and the rules state that they have to be a student at the school. The mixed schools, those students all attend one school. Same thing with a private school that might be a 6 through 12, they all attend the same school. And when you use the word feeds the only high school, those students still have school choice, the ability to go to a different school or go to a private school. So it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to end up at that high school.
And I can add to that too, just control open enrollment that was put in place in statute a few years ago has completely changed your zone school, I guess, because again, I'm a creature of habit too. I knew kids that went to Spa Elementary were going to go to North Grand Middle School, and they would have tricklate to North Grand High School just because of where you live. Right now, the way the statute is written, the only thing where you reside at guarantees you a spot is if a school's at capacity. So if I live in a school's attendance zone and that school's at capacity, they have to provide a seat for me. That's really, when you talk about zone residents, that's really all zone residents mean anymore, is that if a school is at capacity, they have to provide a seat for you. With control of enrollment, if a seat's available in Miami and I live in Pensacola and I can provide transportation, fly to get there to school every day, and there's a seat available, then I can enroll in that school. So control of enrollment has changed the mindset, and for some of us veteran coaches that have been doing it a while and we're used to that zoning, attendance zone, as we used to call it, we've got to change our mindset. That attendance zone, again, is in place if a school's at capacity because they have to provide a seat for me, or that's a school that I have to go to or can go to if I don't go anywhere else. But with all other choices out there between charters, in the private independent schools, or other schools in the area that I could choose, whether it's in my county, outside of my county, those aren't my kids anymore. Those kids belong to, whoever they choose to, whatever school they choose to enroll in or participate in sports at once they get to the 9th grade level. Impermissible benefits, we talked about that a little bit, and please, I am a Seminoles. I know there's probably a lot of Gator haters and some Miami Hurricane fans here, but me accepting that apron and my gift certificate to Four Rivers put me in a position where if I was a student athlete for receiving those things, I could be ruled ineligible for a year. And here's just some other things that I received. But again, school-based financial assistance that exceeds the amount that the student is approved for through financial aid, that can be considered impermissible benefit. The other items on there, cash-like items, clothing, gifts, stuff like that, loans or assistance. Payment for work not performed, those are other examples of impermissible benefits. Free or reduced cost transportation, living on a part of or full-time basis, regardless of rent is paid with the school employee. Free or reduced cost rent for housing or vehicles or others, or full or partial payment for moving expenses. Those are all things that could be considered impermissible benefits. It's not all inclusive because I'm quite sure that there's something else that's not listed, but we always go back to our original statement on the impermissible benefit. Is it something that's generally offered or made available for all students? And if it's not offered all the time and generally made available for all students, then it could be considered an impermissible benefit. There's a few others: employment assistance, free reduced cost to attend a sports camp. If you're hosting a camp and everybody has to pay except for the elite athletes, they don't have to pay, then that could be considered an impermissible benefit, or any other arrangement, assistance, or discount benefit that is, again, not generally available, made available to all students at the school. Some common misperceptions, I sort of alluded to this a little while ago. Is it okay to have contact with students as they are my students, as their feeder school is zoned for my high school? For me, it was North Marion High where I coached at. North Marion Middle was about a mile away, right across 301, the intersection 301 there. And so I would go over and again, assume that those kids are zoned to matriculate to North Marion High School based on where they live. A lot of times we refer to those kids as my kids, and again, those are not my kids. Florida Statute 1231, which provides control of enrollment for the entire state, changed that. So until those kids either choose to come to North Marion High or they choose to go to a private school or charter school or some other way, those kids are not mine. And again, that is a common misconception or misperception of our veteran coaches, because that's what was ingrained in our head for so long, that these are our zone kids. These are your zone kids. Your zone kids are scheduled to come to your school, but control of enrollment sort of has pushed that zone kids to the side, and those are not your kids until they actually attend your school.
Craig, we had a question that I did answer via text, but I'll also quickly answer, is talking about the controlled open enrollment forms and regarding charter schools, and whether or not when a student goes in and fills out the controlled open enrollment for a public school, the county decides if the school has capacity and that's out of district student can participate for the school. As far as a charter school goes, the charter school is going to have to make that decision based on their enrollment number. So if the charter school is at capacity and has a waiting list of 100 students that are trying to get into the school, then an athlete that comes in would have to be in that waiting list and wait their turn to participate in athletics, even though they're not taking up a seat, because they would be taking an athletic opportunity from a student that's on the waiting list or a student at the school. And it could be considered an impermissible benefit if that student is allowed to just skip over the waiting list to participate in a sport. So the charter schools do have to sort of police themselves a little bit in that regard, and ensuring that if they're at capacity, that non-traditional, that the students that are coming in as non-traditional students would not have the opportunity to participate at that point.
Another misperception is okay to have contact with a student or a family member of a student who does not attend my school if they initiate the contact. Hit it all the time. Anytime we get text messages in, the first thing a coach says is, well, I didn't initiate the contact. They initiated the contact with me, so I didn't actively go try to encourage or urge, entice, or pressure. They came to me. Again, it doesn't matter who initiates the contact. That's irrelevant. It's the content of the conversation that matters as far as the violation. So as I stated earlier, casual contact with a student or family in a normal community session is not a violation. It's once the conversation turns to athletics or changing schools, that's when you please need to refer your those parents or the kids to your register or your admissions at that point in time. Another misperception, it is not a violation to share facts when communicating to a student or any family member of a student who attends another school. And again, there's a fine line between providing facts and making comparisons. If you're making or implying your school is better than any other schools, then that is considered a violation. If you're talking about open roster spots or other sports specific or other team specific information, that is also a violation. I mean, this example here, 3 days worth of recruiting mail letters at such and such school. Some places don't see that many in 3 years. So it was a definite comparison. It was within the same county that this mess tweet was sent out, and there were violations versus the school for this act. Next one, when I make contact with the student, I do not intend to pressure, urge, or entice. Again, we talked about that one before. Perception is reality. It's not your intentions, but it's how the student or the family perceives what is being done. So again, if it's not your student, please limit what you say so that it doesn't put you in a position where you have to try to defend that you didn't, those were not your intentions, or this is not what you said. The easiest way is just to avoid interactions or limit your interactions with students that do not attend your school or not part of your, participate at your school. The next few slides, we're pretty close to the end, which is good. I'm almost within an hour, I want to stay within an hour. These are some forms that I'm going to make available to district ADs to pass on to schools or your schools. And again, when I put together, it's a quick reference sheet. You'll see it on 3 pages, but it's something that can be printed out front and back on legal size paper, where it's a quick reference for you as a coach. The first part in orange deals with forms. We all know the EO2 is a pre-participation form, the EO3, the consent form. And EO6 is something that you may not be involved with. It's probably for the athletic director, but I wanted to include it on here. It's basically a notice of transfer for the old school folks. It's similar to what the old blue waiver form that we used to share between schools when a kid went from one school and went to another school. And the reason why I included this on there, I constantly talk to ADs about sharing that in principles, because it provides an opportunity to be proactive, to ask the school that's losing the student if they felt anything was done inappropriately, to get the kid to change schools. Plus, it also gives the school a chance to state the kid's eligibility status when they left the school, that the kid wasn't suspended from our office for a year. Because when the kid comes to your school, they're not going to tell you that they had a year suspension from the association for an unsportsmanlike act conduct. You won't see it in the Kim folder. And so unless someone from the school reaches out to the previous school, you may not be aware of that information. Allow a student athlete to participate pretty much the majority of your season, and all of a sudden at some point in time that prior school will send in an allegation saying Craig was ineligible and played all season long. Now you're having to forfeit all your contests, any wins, and any honors or awards that were won during that time. And, for a volleyball team with 15, 16 players on it, or football team with 50, or bowling or swimming or whatever sport may be, there's a lot of other kids on the team that had nothing to do with the violation, or that are innocent, that will get penalized from wins as a result of just a lack of having contact. So I emphasize the L6, not so much for you to initiate that, but as a coach, if you get a kid from another school, pick up the phone and call the coach, the school that that kid came from, and speak to the coach and have a conversation. Number one, you can build up trust and build up a relationship with that coach, because you're being proactive and saying, hey, Craig Damon just showed up at my school. Why is he at my school? Did something happen? Did the kid move? Try to get a little background information. May give you an opportunity to find out if a kid was a discipline issue at the previous school. So you sort of not necessarily taint yourself, but you know what maybe to look out for. But having that, opening that line of communication up between schools, especially with coaches, I think can help build relationships in the state of Florida, but it also can help curb some of the recruiting stuff that's going on. GA4 is just if a kid did not start ninth grade at your school, or if your school is sixth grade, didn't start there, must have that just stating that it's an affidavit that basically the parents are stating that they were not recruited. The exceptional sportsmanship report, if you're playing against a school and that school has great sportsmanship and somebody does something, take time to fill out that AT7 and send it to our office so that that school can be recognized for displaying good sportsmanship. We very seldom get those. Sometimes we get them from officials, but very seldom do they come from schools. So if you're playing against an opponent and that school shows great sportsmanship, send that to our office so that that school can be recognized, just as you would want some other school to send something in to recognize your school and your team and your student athletes for exceptional sportsmanship behavior. The blue section deals with bylaws. We have 10 bylaws in the handbook. It's the white pages of our handbook. It's pretty thick, and it's written in legal language. So I skipped through most of the stuff that you as a coach do not need to know. Again, bylaw 1 talks about the purpose of the association. Bylaw 7 that I listed, sportsmanship. 10 talks about sanctioning on coaches, forfeiture contests, and then appeals. So these next 3 slides, you'll see the forms when they get to your school. It's basically you can print it out and keep it as a quick reference. It'll tell you what type form or what bylaw or policy to give you a title of the form or the bylaw or policy. It'll give you a brief description. It'll tell you where you can find it at, and then it'll tell you what the purpose of that form is for. So again, this first page here deals with forms and bylaws. And the next couple of slides are basically policies. More so, most of the stuff that coaches will need to know are listed in policy. 4.6, 4 deals with contests, 6 season limitations. And with season limitations, I want to highlight if you're in a sport that has tournaments. A lot of times, for example, in basketball, we allow 25 contests. For some folks may schedule 23 contests and schedule a tournament and assume that they're only going to play 2 games. They're going to lose the 2 games. Well, your team might get hot and make it to the championship game, which means you played 4 games. And then at the end of the season, now you're trying to cancel games to stay on the 25, or you go over 25, and by our policy, you lose 2 games for every game that you go over the season limit for the following school year. So now you're playing less games, and kids that had nothing to do with it are being penalized because we didn't pay attention. So as you're making your schedule out, and if you're going to participate in tournaments, please keep in mind that you may want to assume that you're going to make it to the championship game and count 4 games. And if you lose, get eliminated from the tournament after 2 games, and try to pick up 2 games maybe later on in the season, as opposed to scheduling 21 games and you play 22 games, 23 games, play 4 in a tournament, and now you're over and you're losing games for the next year. The policies we talked about earlier, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 are also there. Those are important. Your district planning meetings. Policy 18, which deals with practices and scrimmages, what you can and can't do. We can be part of your practices and scrimmages. And then policy 26, which deals with all-star events. Again, that's something that you pay attention to. Policy 30.3, unsportsmanlike act by a coach or representative. So you can, before you curse that official or pick up the flag or throw your head or do whatever, you see what the possible sanctions that could come to you. The other policies there deal with other things that, use of alcohol, filming, videotaping games, recruiting, 36 and 37. And then there's the ones that deal with safety and health, which is 40, 41, 42, 43. But I also shared the blue little box at the bottom. I didn't list them all, but go on our website and look up the sport administrative procedures. Each of our sports have administrative procedures that go along with the bylaws and policies. And a lot of times coaches only look at the handbook and don't see something in the handbook, but it's listed in the administrative procedures, and end up getting in trouble or putting their school in a position where they're getting sanctioned because they didn't follow the administrative procedures. The administrative procedures is basically more of a day-to-day operations from a specific sport, different things that you need to know. So please refer to those administrative procedures because they are very useful and helpful for what you would need to as a coach. And again, getting to the last couple slides, this saying is pretty simple. Keep high school sports in perspective in terms of what we're supposed to be about. We're not, none of us are making millions of dollars as coaches, coaching the sport. There's not a national championship or any of those things. It's about providing a safe and positive environment for student athletes to participate in sports. And again, I'm a product of sports. I'm quite sure you guys are a product of sports too. Sports builds so many things that you don't learn in the classroom or you can't learn in the community as far as your character, perseverance, and all those things. And you guys know all those things, so I don't need to repeat those things, but there's so much that I can relate back to today that I learned from being a part of sports. And that's the bigger picture about sports. If a kid makes it, gets a college scholarship or makes it to the NFL, that's like icing on top of the cake. But when we can coach up kids and see our kids go and be great fathers, great wives, or great community leaders, or people that are being productive in our communities and doing the right things and making the right decisions and having a good impact, then that's the time when I guess as coaches we get the pat on the back and we get the reward, because again, we could coach our whole lifetime, 30 years, 20 years, or whatever, and never have a kid that makes it to the professional level. May not ever have a kid that go to college on a scholarship. But the majority of our kids at some point in time, whether they go on a college scholarship or play professionals, are going to have to be citizens in our communities, and they're going to have to be leaders in our communities and have a job and go to job every day. And any role or impact that we can have on giving them a positive outlook to help them have a positive life afterwards, that's what we're really about. And at that point in time now, I appreciate all of you for being here today. And we are at about 57 minutes. My contact information, Scott's contact information is there, and we can entertain any questions that people may want to send in at this point in time.
I do have a couple here. If anybody else wants to send any in, obviously, please feel free to do so right now. I have a couple that we can address. We had a question about the EL6 versus the GA4. They are somewhat similar. The GA4 is actually a required document that the student and their family would fill out. And that is if, as Mr. Damon said, when a student transfers or comes to your school, whether it's in the summer, the off season, during the season, if they come in at that point from another school that was not the terminal grade, so not a student that went to a middle school that ended with 8th grade and now they're coming into your school as a 9th grader, that you would not need a GA4. But any student, if they went to 9th grade at a school, now they're coming to your school in 10th grade, you would be required to fill out that GA4, the student to fill out that GA4, and their parents signing off saying we were not recruited to come to this school in any way. This was our decision to come to this school. The EL6 is a document that for that same student, you are going to send that to their previous school. And that previous school is going to let you know if that student was eligible at that school. It's also going to answer a few other questions that, as Mr. Damon stated, is going to keep you out of trouble. We've seen some schools that have had to forfeit their entire season's worth of games because they did not communicate with the other school. Come to find out at the end of the season, the student was ineligible the entire time because they had been alternatively placed or kicked out of school and never served to that suspension. And so they were ineligible the entire time. So that EL6 is a peace of mind that is coming to your school from their previous school is still eligible. And the GA4 is what the student will fill out. We had the question, can we just have every student fill out the GA4? You could do that if you'd like. If you want the peace of mind that none of the students at your school were recruited, you could ask all of your students to fill out the GA4. And then Craig, if you would like to address, we had a question about students transferring mid-season and gaining eligibility. So transfer after starting a sport, you want to address that with the good cause policy? I think it was in relation to the good cause policy.
Yeah, transfers, you know, and again, Florida is very unique. We're probably, you know, when we go to our summer conferences with the other state associations, nobody wants to hear what we do in Florida because they think we are way out in left field. We are the most liberal folks around. We let anybody play any point in time. I think in other states, if you transfer, you got to sit out a year before you can gain eligibility. In our state law says that a kid can transfer and be immediately eligible to participate if they have not played the sport. If they have, then it comes down to, number one, if they were parents are active military duty and they get a change of orders where they have to move to a different area, those kids are immediately eligible to play, even though they've already been playing the same sport, but at a different school. If students are part of a foster care system and get a new foster care placement where they're placed in a different home that causes the student to have to move and the student can no longer attend the previous school, then those students are also immediately eligible to continue participating. If a student's parents are going through a divorce or court ordered, and there's court order change in custody based on divorce or separation, a serious illness or death of a custodial parents, again, those students, again, and the key to it is not an affidavit where one parent signs the kid over to another parent. It says court ordered change in custody. So that means the judge signed off on the change in custody. It went through the court system. If that's the case, then again, those kids are immediately eligible. The fourth option is what the majority of our kids sort of fall in that category that are able to continue participating is good cause. And good cause it varies from district to district, from public to private. State statute allow the governing body, whether it's a school district for public schools, a charter school board, or an independent schools governing body to create what they feel are exceptions to that rule that would allow a kid to continue participating. So a kid could possibly transfer mid-season, you know, after the second, third contest of the season, go to a different school and be eligible to continue participating if they meet one of those four exceptions. And usually the last exception is good cause. Our office, because of state law, we typically don't ask if an allegation comes into place about whether questions of a school's good cause policy, then we will ask you to produce that good cause policy and to illustrate what you feel the good cause that you use to grant that kid eligibility. And if you use something and it really don't apply, then yes, there could be sanctions taken against you and it could cause a student athlete to be ineligible and have to forfeit any contest that student participated in. But if not, and again, those good causes varies. And the argument we get from a lot of folks is that, my district is very strict. We don't approve anybody, but the county right next door allows anybody to come in. Their good cause policy is if you can walk and chew gum without falling, then you can play. So state statute gave that authority to school districts. They took that out of our hands. So we no longer have any control over that as far as to just make sure that they are following what state statute requires.
I don't see any other questions. That might be it, Craig. I'm not sure if anybody has anything last minute, but I have not had anything else come in.
Again, I would like to thank everybody for coming. Please email me or Scott and let us know, provide feedback, good, bad, the ugly. This is our first time doing something like this. We talked about possibly making it a monthly deal on hot topics or things that you guys may want to hear us talk about from an eligibility standpoint. I know a lot of times you guys rely on your athletic directors to be in charge of that, but sometimes the coach need to hear it from somebody else, and we're more than welcome to do this as often as needed. I do miss going to Daytona and being on the beach at FACA and seeing each of you in person, because it's always a good time. It's time to get away. But again, as a former coach, to be around my colleagues, as I would refer to you guys, because again, we all sort of have the same thing at heart. And I can't wait for the next opportunity to be in front of you guys in person. But again, just thank you for the number of folks that registered, got on board today, because it was actually less than a week ago that we even put this out. So my anticipation that we probably have 25 to 30 people that will register, and I'll be talking about 25 or 30 people, not knowing that we're going to have 248 that registered for to be on here. I know we didn't get that many completely on here, but the fact that many people took time to register for it, I'm very grateful. And again, reach out to our office there, anything at any time that we ever can do to answer a question or do anything for you guys. That's what we're here for, to serve our member schools.
Craig, we have a question from Mr. Talbot and wants to know, I'm not sure if this is something we're going to cover in this session or not, but if we could give a brief overview of the Zachary Martin Act. Is that something that we're prepared to cover here?
No, I am not prepared to cover that. Thanks, Mr. Talbot. If I would have known that question was coming, I would have had Mr. Harrison on here. I can share bits and pieces of it. It's a lot of stuff is dealing with things that people have already had in place. The wet bulb globe, making sure you have a cooling mechanism. At one point in time, it was specific about a cooling tub, but they changed the language where it's a cooling mechanism. And a cooling mechanism could be something as simple as a tarp that you can place ice in and wrap a kid up like in a cocoon or a taco, if you want to call it that. So it varies to whatever you need to be creative to get a kid's temperature to go down as quickly as possible. The CPR and AED part of, I think that doesn't go into effect until the 2021 school years. So where anyone that's going to be at any activity, whether it's a practice or game, must be certified in CPR and AED, so that they can provide those type of things. And I'm trying to remember the other one. The policies 40, 41, 42, and 43 now also apply to summer. So with the heat and all those type things where it was not necessarily required in summer because we did not regulate summer, now state statute says any type of activity, whether it's during the school year or outside the school year, must follow the Zachary Martin Act. So that information will be shared with your athletic directors here pretty soon. They will have a hard copy of it. I know it's been in the media across, whether it's newspaper or on the news. They've been talking about it, but we will have that information posted on our website where you can actually see the language for the Zachary Martin Act. Any other questions?
No, nothing else that's come in. Thank you guys for the questions. We appreciate everybody that contributed the questions. And again, as Craig's already said, we'll reinforce it again. This goes for any time, not just immediately following this. We are here to answer your questions. We are a resource for you, and we're happy to speak to you at any time. Speak to your athletic director. Obviously, we encourage you to go to your athletic director first. And then, come to us if you have any questions. We're happy to answer those for you. And again, thank you.
I'm gonna stop the recording. You can stop it from recording now, I think. All right, well, let me stop. Okay.